An orca was held responsible for the death of a trainer. The theme park reported that Tilikum is sick, suffering from a bacterial infection in his lungs. In 2010, trainer Dawn Branchot died when the orca pulled her underwater, causing her to drown. Imagine a world where the ocean's most impressive creatures turn into lethal predators. Orcas, or killer whales, have long haunted the seas, earning a fearsome reputation for their strength and intelligence. These marine giants are capable of carrying out deadly and shocking attacks, leaving their victims in complete terror. From the tragic death of a trainer at SeaWorld to the dark side of life in captivity, no one is immune to the power of orcas. Join us as we reveal some of the most terrifying orca attacks in history and explore the chilling moments when these ocean titans strike. But before we get started, make sure to subscribe to our channel and leave your like. Now let's get started. Number 1. The attack on Kenneth Peters. On November 30th, 2006, SeaWorld was rocked by a shocking incident that dramatically highlighted the inherent dangers of working with orcas. Trainer Kenneth Peters was performing with Kasatka, one of SeaWorld's most iconic and powerful orcas, during a routine show. Everything seemed normal during the performance until the moment Kenneth dove into the water. Instead of the usual affectionate push from Kasatka, he was suddenly dragged beneath the surface with an impressive and terrifying force. The audience was horrified when they realized something terrible had happened. Kasatka, known for her unpredictable nature and moments of aggression, grabbed Kenneth with monstrous strength, pulling him into the murky waters. The rescue team rushed in to try to calm the orca and give commands, but Kasatka was relentless. Kenneth desperately fought to remain calm and attempt to free himself, but the orca showed no signs of stopping. The pain became unbearable when Kasatka bit down on Kenneth's foot, causing excruciating pain. Even so, he stayed focused and tried to reach out to the orca with a gentle touch, attempting to bond with and calm her. Fortunately for Kenneth, Kasatka swam toward the surface, still holding onto him, while the team distracted the orca with a net. Kenneth finally swam toward the edge of the pool and managed to escape. He was pulled to safety, injured, exhausted, but miraculously alive. His body was covered in bite wounds and his foot was broken, but he had survived the harrowing attack. The experience not only traumatized Kenneth, but also raised serious questions about the safety and risks of working with orcas, as well as the ethics of keeping such powerful creatures in captivity. Kasatka's story did not end with the attack. She passed away in 2017 at the age of 41 after years of suffering from a lung infection. Her death not only marked the end of a career of performances, but also highlighted the long-term physical and psychological impact captivity has on these majestic and complex creatures. The incident and Kasatka's death sparked an even more intense debate about animal rights and the reality of captivity in marine parks. Number 2. The tragic encounter between Alexis Martinez and Keo. Alexis Martinez was a trainer at Loro Parque in Spain, where he shared a special bond with Keo, one of the park's most well-known orcas. But on Christmas Eve in 2009, that bond would be tested in a way no one could have foreseen. During a routine performance, Keo's behavior suddenly shifted. What began as a typical display of playful interaction turned into a violent assault. Keo began slamming Alexis repeatedly against the tank walls, showing no signs of stopping despite the frantic efforts of other trainers to intervene. The aggression escalated as Keo dragged Alexis underwater, pulling him to the bottom of the tank. By the time Keo finally released him, it was already too late. Alexis had succumbed to the injuries sustained during the attack. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the marine park industry, prompting a re-evaluation of safety protocols for trainers working with orcas. Initially, Loro Parque claimed that Alexis had drowned, but an autopsy revealed a much darker truth. The cause of death was not accidental. It was the result of a violent attack. This was not the first devastating incident of its kind. Just a few years earlier, trainer Claudia Viard had faced a similar fate. Alexis's death sparked widespread discussions about the ethics of keeping orcas in captivity. It highlighted the very real risks trainers face when working with such powerful animals and fueled broader conversations about animal welfare and the consequences of confinement. Number 3. Joe Silva's ordeal with orcas. On June 15, 2022, Joe Silva and a group of friends set out for a day of sailing in the Azores, a stunning Portuguese archipelago located in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. The waters were calm and the sky was clear, creating the perfect backdrop for a relaxing and memorable trip. As they sailed, they spotted a pod of orcas in the distance, their glossy black dorsal fins slicing through the water. At first, the crew was mesmerized by the sight, watching eagerly as the orcas glided gracefully. It was a rare and thrilling spectacle, and many rushed to grab their phones to capture the moment. However, as the boat slowly drew closer, the sense of wonder gave way to a growing tension. One of the orcas, seemingly bolder or more curious than the rest, suddenly rammed into the boat's rudder with impressive force. The impact was so violent that the entire hull shook, causing some passengers to lose their balance and fall onto the deck. The situation escalated quickly when another orca emerged from behind and struck the stern of the vessel, making the boat dangerously tilt to starboard. Panic set in. The serene day quickly turned into utter chaos as the crew struggled to comprehend what was happening. The rudder had been completely destroyed, leaving the boat helpless and adrift in the vast ocean. Radio communications began to fail due to the impact, and desperation set in as they tried in vain to regain control of the vessel. The wind started to shift and the waves grew larger, making the situation even more precarious. The crew tried everything, redistributing weight, adjusting the sails, using the auxiliary engines, but the damage was too severe. It felt as though they were at the mercy of the sea and the unpredictable will of the orcas. As suddenly as they had begun, the orcas seemed to lose interest. In a surprising turn, they ceased their attacks and swam away in formation, vanishing into the horizon. The silence that followed was as intense as the fear they had just endured. Though everyone on board escaped physically unharmed, the boat was badly damaged, requiring an emergency rescue and a long journey back for repairs. The experience served as a powerful reminder of nature's raw and unpredictable force. A day that began with blue skies and calm seas ended in the terror of an unexpected attack by one of the ocean's most powerful and mysterious creatures. For Joe Silva and his friends, the memory remains clear. No matter how beautiful they may be, orcas are still wild and formidable predators. Number 4. The threat of orca attacks on fishermen. On March 15, 2020, Juan Martinez and his fishing team embarked on a routine fishing trip in the Strait of Gibraltar, where the Atlantic Ocean meets the Mediterranean Sea. Known for its turbulent waters and unpredictable weather, the strait is a challenging place for fishermen. As they ventured further into the water, the morning remained calm, but they soon noticed something in the distance. Initially, they thought it was dolphins, but quickly realized that the sleek black dorsal fins cutting through the water belonged to orcas. The team was initially excited by the rare sight, but the excitement soon turned to unease. The orcas began to circle the boat, approaching with precision and purpose. With their massive bodies and fluid movements, they seemed to observe the team with an unsettling intelligence. The behavior of these orcas was not typical of mere curiosity, but rather a calculated approach, as if they were testing the boat's limits. Without warning, one of the orcas collided with the boat with incredible force, shaking it and unbalancing the team. The impact was so strong that the boat's structure seemed to momentarily disintegrate, with wood creaking and metal cracking under the pressure. The orcas continued to attack, targeting the rudder with each strike. The boat began to tremble violently, screws came loose, and parts of the hull broke. The sound of the impact echoed through the strait, amplified by the choppy waters. Water started flooding the lower deck, and panic set in as the team realized they were stranded and unable to maneuver the boat. Fear took over as the fishermen knew they were in a critical situation. Desperate, they sent a distress signal, clearly describing their situation but unsure of what to expect in return. The situation worsened when a powerful blow tilted the boat sharply, causing two fishermen, Carlos and Luis, to fall into the freezing, turbulent water. The current in the strait and the water temperature were extremely dangerous, making the task of rescuing the men even more challenging. The remaining crew quickly threw life jackets to their fallen comrades while trying to stabilize the boat, but the orcas didn't relent. They circled in the water, watching the men in the water, their dorsal fins cutting the surface in a menacing way. Tension increased, but fortunately, the Coast Guard arrived just in time to rescue Carlos and Luz. When the men were pulled from the water, the orcas, as if fulfilling a purpose, moved away, disappearing into the depths of the strait. The incident left the team shaken, but alive, with only one lingering question: why had the orcas chosen them? The behavior of the orcas that morning brought to light an unsettling mystery, leaving everyone questioning the nature of this interaction. It was a grim reminder that orcas are powerful predators, and sometimes the reason for an attack can be as inexplicable as it is terrifying. Number 5. Coe's Journey to Freedom. In January 1996, a new and remarkable chapter began for Coe, the famous orca from Free Willy. He was transferred from Mexico to the Oregon Coast Aquarium in Newport, Oregon, where for the first time he lived in a tank with seawater. The conditions at the aquarium were much better than the cramped tanks he had endured previously. The natural environment provided by the aquarium helped significantly improve Co's health. During the 8 months he spent there, he regained strength, gained weight, and slowly began to recover from the trauma of years in captivity. The ultimate goal, however, was Co's release back into the wild. This would be his chance to finally experience the ocean in its fullness and reclaim his place in nature. In 1998, preparations for his release began in earnest, with September 9th marked as the start of a new journey for Co. Co was transported to Kik Bay, a small island off the coast of Iceland, an isolated location that provided the ideal setting for the orca's rehabilitation. The rehabilitation process was gradual and meticulously planned. Co was trained to swim long distances and hunt for his own food, slowly reconnecting with his natural instincts. During this period, Co was closely monitored. A satellite transmitter was placed on him to track his movements, and supervised swimming in open waters began to ensure he was adapting properly to wildlife. This constant care was essential, as Co had to relearn how to be a free orca. Finally, in the summer of 2002, Co was released into the wild. The world watched as the first captive orca was freed into the open ocean, and the event was celebrated as a milestone in the fight for the freedom of captive animals. Initially, Co thrived in the waters off Iceland, swimming freely and even interacting with wild orcas for short periods. His adaptation seemed successful, and freedom appeared to be the reward for all his struggle. However, despite his newfound freedom, Co still sought human contact. He remained close to the bay and continued to interact with the people he encountered, possibly in search of the familiarity and comfort that only humans could offer. This behavior, though understandable, showed how the time spent in captivity can profoundly impact the natural instincts of animals. In December 2003, Co was found swimming in a bay in Norway. His health, already weakened, could not withstand the constant struggle to adapt. At 27 years old, Co succumbed to pneumonia, bringing an end to his journey. His death, though predictable to some, was still a painful loss. It marked the end of a long and complicated process that began with hope but proved to be too difficult for the orca to overcome. Co's life and death became a somber reminder that the rehabilitation of captive orcas is an incredibly challenging process, with few chances of lasting success. Number 6. The dark beginning of orca captivity. In 1965, the world of marine entertainment was forever changed with the capture of a wild orca. Ted Griffin, the owner of the Seattle Marine Aquarium, was responsible for this tragic first step in orca captivity. The orca, taken from the wild, was thrust into the world of entertainment, and crowds gathered to see this powerful creature perform. However, behind the spectacle, a tragic reality was unfolding. The impact of captivity on orcas was devastating and quickly became apparent. Within a year of its capture, the orca died due to the immense stress caused by its new life in captivity. This event marked the beginning of a troubling trend that spread throughout the industry. Despite the tragic loss, Griffin saw the profit potential and initiated a business model based on the capture of wild orcas. The profitability he envisioned was enormous, but the methods employed were cruel and inhumane. Explosives were used to separate young orcas from their family groups, creating utter chaos and profound suffering as the animals were forced onto the shores with massive nets. The agonizing sounds of orcas calling for their lost families were a painful reminder of the emotional cost that captivity imposed on these creatures. Orcas are incredibly intelligent and social animals that live in family groups in the wild. They communicate and form strong emotional bonds, being completely dependent on these ties for their survival. But in captivity, all of these instincts were denied, and the lives of these orcas became lonely and frustrating. The psychological impact was profound, reflected in erratic and aggressive behaviors, which began to emerge in many of these orcas. In 1978, Kasatka, an orca captured in Iceland, became a star at SeaWorld. She was admired for her strength and ability to perform incredible tricks, but over time, her aggression increased, a direct result of being separated from her family and confined to a small tank. The stress from her situation and confinement in an artificial environment began to manifest in aggressive behavior, not only toward other animals, but also toward the human trainers. Other tragic stories followed as orcas like Kasatka exhibited increasing signs of stress and aggression, raising the risk of violent incidents. Trainers like Ken Peters, who had dedicated their lives to training orcas, began to notice the impact on both the animals and themselves. The relationship between trainers and orcas, initially seen as a harmonious collaboration, became tainted by the growing risk of attacks. Kasatka bit Peters twice, once in 1993 and again in 1999. Despite these incidents, Peters dismissed them, but deep down, he knew the risks were growing. Those who were so close to these creatures began to realize that the aggression was not just a physical reaction, but also a psychological response to confinement and the loss of their freedom. Number 7. The Marisol Attack, a business retreat gone wrong. On May 12, 2024, the Marisol, a luxury yacht, departed from the port of Malaga, Spain. On board were several wealthy business associates, including Alex Vargas, a well-known real estate mogul, along with his colleagues William Armitage, a tech magnate, and Veronica Hayes, a real estate investor. The group was on a retreat to discuss business strategies and expansion opportunities across Europe and the Middle East. What was meant to be a relaxing and productive getaway quickly turned into an unexpected nightmare. As the yacht sailed through the calm waters of the Mediterranean, the crew noticed several dorsal fins in the distance. Armitage, fascinated by marine life, pointed them out excitedly, but as the orcas drew closer, the atmosphere shifted from curiosity to fear. The orcas began circling the yacht, transitioning from initial curiosity to an intimidating pursuit. The crew's anxiety grew, and the relaxed atmosphere quickly turned into tension. Captain Miguel, with over 20 years of experience, immediately altered the yacht's course to avoid a possible encounter with the animals. However, one orca seemed determined to approach. It collided with the yacht with terrifying force, making the vessel rock violently. The crew, surprised and frightened, tried to recover, but the orca was relentless. Before they could react properly, the orca struck again, targeting the yacht's stern. The impact caused the yacht to tilt dangerously to one side, and the crew struggled to maintain balance. Damage to the rudder made steering increasingly difficult, while the orcas continued their relentless attacks, showing no signs of retreat. Panic spread among the passengers, and Captain Miguel quickly ordered everyone below deck for safety. He sent out a distress signal, but the orcas did not cease their attack. The pressure mounted with each impact from the orcas, causing more damage to the yacht. The sound of twisting metal and the uncontrollable rocking of the boat heightened the chaos. After what felt like an eternity, a rescue boat finally arrived, and the orcas lost interest, moving away to deeper waters. The Marisol was towed back to shore, severely damaged but with all passengers unharmed. On board, everyone was in shock, processing the intensity of the attack. No one could explain the orcas' behavior. Some speculated it was territorial, while others wondered if it was simply a rare act of aggression. Either way, the attack left everyone on board shaken, questioning the unpredictability of these powerful creatures, who, from simple curiosity, turned into relentless aggressors, putting everyone in danger. Number 8. The tragic death of Jessica Radcliffe. Jessica Radcliffe had always dreamed of working with marine animals. Growing up near the coast, she was surrounded by the ocean from a young age. At 21, she had achieved her dream by becoming the head trainer at Ocean Haven, a marine park similar to SeaWorld. There, she formed a strong bond with Mallow, a 22-foot, 12,000-pound orca who was the park's main attraction. Mallow was known for his calm demeanor and obedience, and his special connection with Jessica allowed her to bring out the best in the orca. Over time, Mallow became even more popular with visitors due to his impressive ability to perform complex maneuvers and interact with the trainers in an engaging way. However, signs of problems began to emerge gradually. Mallow, once known for his flawless performances, started displaying increasingly aggressive behaviors, especially during feeding sessions when he became more territorial. He also began to resist Jessica's commands, which created a growing sense of unease among the trainers, who tried to find ways to cope with the orca's new behavioral challenges. Despite these warning signs, the park insisted that Jessica continue leading the shows, without considering the possibility that the orca might become a threat. Then, during a routine performance, the unthinkable happened. While Jessica was diving into the tank for synchronized swimming, Mallow, in a sudden burst of aggression, lunged at her. He trapped his jaws around her upper torso, dragging her down into the water with terrifying force. The audience watched in horror as Jessica struggled to break free from the orca's relentless grip. Other trainers quickly intervened, trying to help, but Mallow's grip remained firm for more than a minute, causing severe injuries to Jessica. When she finally surfaced, it was too late. Rescue divers attempted to save the trainer, but she had already succumbed to her injuries. The tragedy left the marine park devastated, and Ocean Haven closed its doors shortly afterward, in a decision made to reconsider the practices of handling orcas and ensuring the safety of trainers. Mallow was relocated to a sanctuary, where he was kept away from the demands of performances and the stresses of captivity. Jessica's death raised serious concerns about the safety of working with orcas, even for experienced trainers, and fueled the debate over the risks involved in interacting with these wild animals in a controlled environment. Number 9. The tragic journey of Namu. In 1965, off the coast of British Columbia, a young orca named Namu was captured in a massive salmon net, an event that would drastically alter the course of her life. Namu, born in the C1 pod, was found by fisherman William Loy and later sold to Ted Griffin, an individual who saw potential in the orca not just as a captive animal but as a star attraction. This marked the beginning of Namu's tragic journey from the wild waters to the confines of captivity. Once in Seattle, Namu became an instant sensation. The public marveled at her playful nature and the apparent bond she shared with Griffin. Together, they performed scenes that captivated visitors, creating the illusion of a relationship of friendship and harmony. However, beneath the surface, Namu's life was far from idyllic. Confined to a small enclosure at Pier 56, Namu's natural behaviors were restricted, and her health began to decline despite her vibrant performances and the effort to maintain the appearance of a joyful environment. The cost of captivity was evident, but no one seemed willing to acknowledge its true consequences. Namu's story was romanticized in the 1966 film Namu, My Best Friend, which portrayed her relationship with Griffin as one of mutual affection, a story of harmony between human and animal. However, the reality of Namu's captivity could not be hidden. She suffered from a range of health issues exacerbated by the polluted waters of Elliott Bay, where her tank was located. Additionally, the loneliness and lack of appropriate stimulation for a wild orca began to cause severe damage to her physical and mental health. Namu died in 1966, just 1 year after her capture. Her premature death caused a wave of public sorrow and brought to light the ethics of keeping orcas in captivity. Her early death became a symbol of protest against the cruel practices of animal capture and confinement, and it opened the eyes of many people to the true face of entertainment involving living beings. Namu's life, once seen as an inspiring story of connection between humans and animals, became a symbol of the hidden costs of exploiting wildlife for entertainment. Her legacy would become a milestone in the ongoing debate about the morality of keeping orcas in captivity, fueling the movement against the captivity of cetaceans and the exploitation of animals in artificial environments for commercial purposes. Number 10. The tragic death of Daniel Dukes. In July 1999, SeaWorld Orlando was shaken by a disturbing event when Daniel Dukes, a 27-year-old man with a troubled past, was found dead in the tank of the Orca Tilikum. Dukes, known for his erratic behavior and impulsive choices, had bypassed the park's security to spend the night at the location, unaware of the mortal danger awaiting him. The next morning, his body was found in the water with severe trauma and a series of serious injuries. Dukes, a man with a history of legal problems but also with a caring side and a deep obsession with orcas, made the decision that would change his life that night, after the park had closed to visitors. Driven by his fascination with these imposing animals, Dukes sneaked into Tilikum's enclosure, ignoring any notion of danger. He seemed to have an obsession with the power and majesty of the orca, a creature he saw as fascinating and mysterious, without fully understanding the risk he was running. The enormous orca, weighing an impressive 5,400 kilograms, seemed calm at first but was likely disturbed by the human intrusion. Tilikum responded with brutal force. The orca, with its wild nature still present despite captivity, quickly reacted, ramming Dukes with its monstrous strength, breaking his ribs before pulling him underwater in a horrific and irreversible moment. In a fatal attack, Tilikum bit Dukes with its powerful jaws, crushing the man's bones and leaving him with no chance of escape. When the water cleared, Dukes' lifeless body emerged, with Tilikum circling beneath him, as if marking its territory, a behavior that generated even more horror. The brutality of the death raised urgent questions. How had Dukes bypassed security? What motivated his entry into the tank, and how could the man's behavior have been interpreted as a potential threat to the animal? These questions had no easy answers and were at the heart of the ensuing debate. This incident sparked widespread debate about Tilikum's violent history, an orca with a past marked by tragedies, and whether captivity had contributed to its aggression. This was not the first fatality linked to the orca, and thus, the situation sparked intense discussions about the responsibility of those in charge of the park and the practices involving the capture and maintenance of these animals. The public's reaction was swift, leading to a broader discussion about the captivity of orcas and the ethics surrounding it. Daniel Dukes' death became a crucial turning point in the growing controversy over the treatment of orcas in captivity and its impacts on both the creatures and the humans involved, highlighting the risks and moral implications of keeping wild animals in captivity. Number 11. The suffering of Tamari Tolson at SeaWorld. On July 8, 2002, SeaWorld San Diego was filled with excitement as families gathered to watch the orca show. Among the trainers was 28-year-old Tamari Tolson, who had a deep connection with the orcas she worked with, including Splash and Orchid. Both orcas had troubled pasts. Splash had suffered a seizure in 1995, while Orchid had witnessed the death of her mother during a performance, an event that deeply affected her. Despite the behavioral issues and trauma experienced by these orcas, Tamari felt a strong bond with the animals and continued to work closely with them, believing that her relationship with the cetaceans could heal the wounds of the past and improve their behavior. However, this bond didn't prevent what happened during the show. When the performance began, everything seemed normal at first, with the orcas performing their usual graceful routines. However, signs of agitation started to manifest, something that the experienced trainers quickly noticed. Splash and Orchid began swimming erratically, their uncontrolled spins and jumps revealing an increasing level of stress. Tamari, in an effort to regain control, tried to manage the situation, but the orca's behavior became more unpredictable and aggressive. Without warning, Orchid leaped out of the water and, in a sudden act of violence, bit Tamari's foot, dragging her into the pool. The audience, initially stunned, quickly erupted into screams of panic as Tamari was pulled underwater by the orca, with whom she had shared so many moments. Fortunately, other trainers acted quickly, releasing a dominant orca named Kasaka into the pool. Kasaka, with her authoritative posture and strength, was able to force Orchid to release her grip, allowing Tamari to be rescued. Although the trainer survived, she suffered severe injuries, including an exposed fracture in her arm, which required immediate medical treatment and resulted in a long recovery. This terrifying incident sparked public debate about the safety of orca performances and raised serious concerns about the potential danger posed by these powerful animals. The event also reignited discussions about cetacean captivity, bringing attention to the psychological and behavioral damage caused by confinement and exploitation for entertainment purposes. The ocean, with its wild and untamable nature, continues to hold many secrets, and the unpredictable nature of orcas, animals of exceptional intelligence and strength, remains one of the most frightening aspects of their presence in captivity. Number 12. The heartbreaking story of Hugo, the dark side of captivity. Hugo, a southern resident orca, was born in the wild waters of the Pacific Northwest in 1965. From the earliest years of his life, he lived in a natural environment, surrounded by his family and the characteristic sounds of the ocean. However, at the age of 3, his life took a devastating turn. In 1968, he was violently captured off the coast of Washington during one of the many orca capture operations that took place at the time. He was transported over 3,000 miles to Miami, Florida, where he would be confined to a concrete tank at the Celebrity Bowl, a facility aimed at human entertainment. There, Hugo was thrust into the world of captivity, destined to entertain noisy and curious audiences. The tank where he lived was temporary, narrow, and shallow, hastily constructed while the main habitat was still under development. Even after the completion of the construction, the space was still far from adequate for a creature of his size and intelligence. At first, Hugo's performances caught the public's attention. His jumps and synchronized movements earned applause, but behind the scenes, signs of psychological suffering began to emerge. His trainer, Richard Urey, noticed worrying changes in his behavior. Hugo frequently kept his head out of the water for long periods, an atypical behavior, and his tail drooped, indicating apathy and exhaustion. Despite these clear warning signs, Hugo was forced to continue performing. He was treated as an attraction rather than as a living being with emotions and needs. In the early 1970s, he was placed alongside Lolita, another orca captured from the wild, in the hope that the companionship would alleviate his suffering. However, the space was still too small for two such large animals, leading to constant stress and conflicts. Hugo's case became a sad symbol of the psychological consequences of captivity, and his story continues to move and provoke reflection to this day. Together, they performed synchronized routines, but Hugo's mental state continued to deteriorate over time. His aggression increased and he began to act violently, biting a trainer and banging his head against the tank walls. The aquarium staff ignored his behavior, attributing it to the nature of wild animals in captivity. In 1980, Hugo's condition worsened. His movements, once energetic, became slow, but he was still forced to perform. On March 4, 1980, during a rehearsal, Hugo suddenly stopped moving, floating lifelessly to the surface. An autopsy revealed that Hugo had died from a brain aneurysm, likely caused by years of banging his head against the tank. Hugo's death was a sad reminder of the emotional impact captivity can have on these magnificent creatures. His tragic story sparked global discussions about the ethics of keeping orcas in captivity, raising awareness about the cost of human entertainment. Number 13. The tragic death of Dawn Branchot. Dawn Branchot had always dreamed of working with orcas, a passion she had nurtured since childhood, fueled by books, documentaries, and visits to marine parks. Determined, she studied marine biology and spent years preparing until she finally achieved her goal. When she became one of the top trainers at SeaWorld Orlando, Dawn was known for her dedication, professionalism, and deep love for the animals she worked with, especially Tilikum, the largest orca in captivity. But Tilikum's past was dark, marked by incidents of violence and unpredictable behavior. On February 24, 2010, during the Dine with Shamu event, what was supposed to be just another routine show turned into a nightmare. As Dawn lay near the edge of the pool, she signaled for Tilikum to approach, a gesture she had repeated countless times in previous performances. However, in a terrifying instant, Tilikum grabbed Dawn's ponytail and violently pulled her into the tank. The audience, unaware of the reality unfolding before them, initially thought it was a part of the act. But trainers watching from behind the scenes quickly realized the seriousness of the situation. Tilikum's strength was overwhelming, dragging Dawn forcefully to the bottom of the pool. Despite her desperate attempts to break free, she was overpowered by the animal, who refused to release her. The water soon turned red, and the tension in the stadium was palpable. For more than 30 minutes, Tilikum shook and held Dawn underwater, ignoring all commands and rescue efforts. When her lifeless body was finally recovered, a devastating silence fell over the stadium. The tragedy made headlines around the world. Investigations later revealed that Tilikum had been involved in 2 previous deaths. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you enjoyed our content, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Don't forget to check out other interesting content appearing on your screen right now, and I'll see you in the next video. See you next time.